And then there is the toppling of the Saddam statue. A new Army report, more or less sneaked out over the weekend, concluding that the history we thought we saw in the making was actually made by a Marine colonel. That it was not entirely a grassroots effort was painfully obvious to anyone who witnessed live the actual event, the fruitless attempts to take it down, first by sledgehammer, then by rope. And as we noted here on Countdown, on that day it was ultimately American Marines who hoisted a chain around Saddam's statue's neck and then pulled it to the ground. But what we did not know is that the toppling of the statue was staged by an Army psychological operations team. As Marines converged on Firdos Square in central Baghdad, a psyops colonel identified the statue as a, quote, target of opportunity. And as one member of the team told Army investigators, testified to them, the colonel, quote, decided that the statue must come down. The psyops team then reportedly used loudspeakers to get Iraqis into the process, even placing Iraqi kids on the Marine vehicle that had been brought in to pull the statue down. But the props used on that day may not have been limited to sledgehammers and kids. In a new documentary about the war called Control Room, a producer from the network Al Jazeera claims that the civilians we see stomping on Saddam's head and cheering their liberation were not even Iraqis. And anyone familiar with the various accents of the Middle East could tell you they were not Iraqis. So what actually happened in Firdos Square on April 9th, 2003, and what actually happened the same day in newsrooms and homes around this country? The pulling down of the statue may not have been premeditated psyops, or not very premeditated, more of an opportunity seized. But here's the question. Who were these psyops guys trying to influence, Iraqis or Americans or both?
Both.
So pulling down the statue, in your opinion, actually impacted the battle for Baghdad or the lack of a battle for Baghdad?
Oh, yeah. Well, most of the things we did once we reached the outskirts of Baghdad were to intimidate the Iraqis who still had guns and could still resist into not resisting, because everybody was talking about bloody street fighting if we went into Baghdad, and the psychological warfare people knew that their job would be more important because we didn't have enough guns to take on every armed Iraqi, but we might have enough good ideas, and taking down the statue was one of them, because basically it showed the Arab world as well as, you know, most Iraqis that Saddam was really gone. You got to remember that Saddam had terrorized the Iraqis for 30 years, and the psychological warfare people knew from what they had seen in Eastern Europe after the fall of communism that this leaves a population traumatized and not quite sure that they are free or that the tyrant is gone. And we've seen examples of that in the last year. So symbols are extremely important.
So in reviewing this, we're still at the point where, boom, the guys see the crowd, they see the statue, they put two and two together and do a great job of arranging this, and down the statue comes. I don't think anybody, pro-war, anti-war, or maybe anti-war, but certainly anybody on the left or the right has a real objection to that gesture to this point. But afterwards, when reporters ask questions about, was that an American flag over his face, who did the pulling, the American soldiers or the Iraqi civilians, who did this, the military came down on them, on us, like that statue falling. I mean, I asked those questions. I have my patriotism and my loyalty question, and I'd like to know where it's written that as part of PSYOPs, it's okay to try to also strong-arm a free press in this country and dress up a lie in a flag and try to shove it down the throats of the citizens. What part of PSYOPs is that? Does it call for at some point in the safe future, whether that's 6 months or a year later, saying to the American people, we had more of a hand in this than we admitted to at the time?
That's exactly what they did over the weekend.